Ladies, I want you to take a moment, breathe deeply, and forget everything society has ever told you about beauty and age. Let's start fresh with the truth. The mirror doesn't always reflect the full story, and magazines don't always show the full spectrum of beauty. You see, growing older doesn't mean growing invisibly, it means evolving into a deeper, more magnetic version of yourself. And today, I want to share with you 12 signs that you are, without a doubt, a good-looking older woman ever. You don't think so? In the stillness of a quiet morning, when the air is calm and the world has not yet begun to rush, there is a kind of beauty that emerges not in youth, not in perfection, but in presence. To understand what it means to be truly beautiful as an older woman, one must first step away from the noise of modern comparison and return to a more rooted awareness. In this awareness, it becomes clear that beauty is not what fades with time, it is what deepens, what becomes more defined. Like a mountain shaped by wind and weather, it becomes more powerful through its endurance. There is a misconception carried by many that beauty has an expiration date, that somehow the mirror becomes less kind as the years pass, but this is not the truth. What fades is only the superficial understanding of what beauty is. When a woman ages, her beauty does not disappear. It becomes more difficult to categorize, more unique, more complex. This is not a loss, it is an evolution. Imagine an old tree standing in a forest. Its trunk is thick, its bark weathered, its branches twisted with time, but it stands tall, rooted deeper than any sapling. When people pass by, they may not notice its smoothness or symmetry, but they feel its presence. That kind of presence cannot be manufactured or painted on. It is earned. It is lived. The same is true of a woman who has moved through decades of life. Her beauty is not in denying her age, but in carrying it with grace. To be beautiful in later years is not to chase youth, but to embody serenity. Serenity is rare in a world that is always in a hurry. A woman who walks slowly, who listens intently, who speaks with care, has the power to still a restless mind. Her presence is an anchor. She does not need to compete. She does not need to perform. Her energy speaks on her behalf. This energy, this presence, arises from a life lived with awareness, from joy that was not fleeting, from suffering that did not break her. Each wrinkle is a line from a poem written by experience. Each gray hair is a silver thread stitched into the robe of wisdom. In a culture that chases youth, it is easy to forget that the most beautiful moments in life are the ones that take years to grow. A fine wine is not hurried. A mountain path is not straight. And the most beautiful woman in the room is not always the youngest, but the one who understands her value without needing it affirmed. When a woman begins to see beauty in this way, she discovers it not only in herself, but in others. Her definition expands. She no longer measures by skin or shape, but by kindness, authenticity, and self-respect. This is when true beauty becomes apparent. It glows from within and cannot be taken away. There is a story of a woman in her 70s who was known in her village for her captivating smile. She had no jewels, no expensive clothing, no makeup. But when she entered a room, even children turned to watch her. Her secret was simple. Every day she watered her plants with joy, greeted her neighbors by name, and cooked with love. When asked how she remained so radiant, she replied, "I keep my thoughts clean and my heart open. The rest takes care of itself." This is the kind of beauty that grows only with time. There is another kind of strength that appears in a woman who has lived long enough to know herself. It is the strength of not needing to prove. When she walks, she does not hurry. When she speaks, she does not shout. Her movements are deliberate. Her gaze is steady. She is not swayed by fashion or approval. She dresses not to impress but to express. And that kind of confidence is the most attractive quality of all. It tells others, "I know who I am. I am not afraid of your silence." To understand this beauty, one must shift the eyes inward. It cannot be seen if you are always looking outward, comparing, evaluating, criticizing. A younger woman may turn heads with appearance, but an older woman who is aware, who is grounded, turns hearts. And that is a far more powerful transformation. This is why the notion that beauty belongs only to the young is not only untrue, it is misleading. The body may change, but the spirit can grow stronger. The skin may soften, but the eyes sharpen with clarity. There is a light that does not dim with age, only changes in color, becoming softer, deeper, more golden, like the last hour of the sun. It is the light of maturity, of peace, of a heart that has known both joy and sorrow, and still remains open. Now, to see beauty not just as features but as energy is to redefine how we relate to ourselves. A beautiful woman in her later years does not chase what has passed. She nurtures what still blooms. She takes care of her health, not because she wants to look young, but because she honors her body as a vessel for life. She moves, she breathes deeply, she rests when needed. Her wellness is not performative, it is sacred. This approach to health becomes part of her beauty. You can see it in her posture, the way she sits upright without tension. You can hear it in her voice, which is calm, resonant, and unhurried. You can feel it in her presence, the absence of anxiety, the freedom from competition, the quiet dignity of someone who has lived enough to know what matters. To be a beautiful older woman, you do not need to look a certain way. You need to be a certain way, present, aware, grateful. This presence does not fade with age. In fact, it often strengthens. Many women in their later years begin to reclaim time for themselves. They paint again, they travel, they laugh louder, they say no more is. These choices create an aura that is deeply attractive, not because they are trying, but because they are living. And here lies the key. Beauty that tries to prove something is often fleeting, but beauty that simply is, that exists effortlessly, in alignment with truth, is timeless. That beauty cannot be hidden, it cannot be denied, and it cannot be taken away. A young woman may be admired, but an older woman who knows her power is revered. She has learned to rest in herself, and resting in oneself is a sign of deep strength. A strength that does not need display, but is felt deeply by all who encounter it. To see yourself through this lens is to shift everything. It is to wake up not looking for flaws, but for light. To greet your reflection not with critique, but with compassion. And to carry your presence through the day with intent, to impress, but to uplift. There is no greater beauty than the one that reflects a life of alignment, a life of care, a life of quiet victories and unspoken grace. When you recognize that within yourself, you stop asking whether you are still beautiful. You already know the answer. In the silence between two breaths, there is space. In that space lies a question. How many times have you looked at yourself and failed to see the beauty that others notice immediately? Not because it wasn't there, but because your eyes were trained to seek something else. To seek flaws, to seek youth, to seek a version of yourself that once was or perhaps never existed in the first place. The reason many older women don't recognize their own attractiveness lies not in reality, but in perception, specifically in the distortion created by decades of conditioning. From early years, a mirror is placed in front of every girl. This mirror doesn't just reflect her features, it reflects the opinions of others. It reflects advertisements, comments, comparisons. It teaches her to measure herself, to see herself through filters that are not her own. Over time, this mirror becomes more than an object. It becomes a belief that worth is tied to appearance, and that appearance is best when it is young, flawless, and pleasing to others. The damage of this belief system runs deep. It lingers even when a woman has gathered wisdom, strength, and grace. It whispers that those things are not enough. But beauty, in its truest form, is never something that can be validated by outside eyes. It is a resonance, a frequency, a quiet confidence. It is the way you enter a room with presence, the way your hands move with intention, the way you listen without judgment. These are not visible in the mirror that society holds up. They are visible only to those who see not with their eyes, but with their awareness. There is a story of a woman who spent her youth on magazine covers. She was celebrated for her beauty, known across continents. As she aged, she withdrew from public view. Not because her beauty disappeared, but because she no longer fit the standard that had once elevated her. Years later, she was invited to speak to a group of young women. She stepped onto the stage wearing no makeup, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her back straight. When she began to speak, the entire room fell into silence. Not because of who she had been, but because of who she was. The elegance in her voice, the dignity in her posture, the peace in her eyes, these captivated more than any photograph ever had. That is the lesson. If you rely on others to name your beauty, you give away your power. If you rely on time to define your attractiveness, you place your worth on something that never stands still. But when you begin to see your own reflection with different eyes, with eyes of understanding, with eyes that see beyond the surface, you begin to reclaim what was never lost. Recognition is the first step. To recognize that the discomfort you feel with your appearance is not rooted in your truth, but in someone else's story. You do not have to carry that story any longer. You can replace it with your own. A story where your laugh lines are symbols of joy, not flaws. Where your skin is seen not as aged, but as seasoned. Where your body is honored for carrying you through life, not criticized for changing. When the mind is conditioned to believe beauty belongs to the young, it becomes blind to the richness that maturity brings. But when that conditioning is broken, new vision arises. A vision that sees radiance in a calm gaze, beauty in thoughtful silence, allure in kindness and clarity. The fourth truth reveals itself here. Health, self-care, posture, and joy are not separate from beauty, they are its foundation. The modern idea that beauty is only skin deep is incomplete. Beauty that lasts, beauty that resonates, begins much deeper. It begins with how you treat your body, with how you nourish your energy, with how you stand, breathe, and move through space. Posture, for instance, is a reflection of inner alignment. A woman who stands tall, with shoulders open and spine straight, communicates dignity without a single word. Her body language speaks of inner order that is deeply attractive, not because it mimics youth, but because it reveals self-respect. A hunched back may be a sign of physical fatigue, but often it is also a sign of emotional burden. When you release that burden, when you stand fully in your body, you radiate presence. That presence draws others in. Health is another form of beauty, one that cannot be replaced by cosmetics or clothing. When the body is treated with care, fed with intention, moved with rhythm, rested with love, it responds. It glows, not in the way of glossy skin, but in the way of vitality. a clear mind, a balanced mood, an energized step. These are signs of a woman in harmony with herself. Harmony is magnetic. Self-care goes beyond routine. It is a declaration. I am worth this time, this attention, this nourishment. Whether it's a walk in the early morning, a glass of water sipped in silence, or a moment of breath awareness, these acts shape how you feel about yourself. And how you feel about yourself changes what others see. A woman who respects her own time teaches the world how to treat her. There is a tale told in many cultures about the woman who smiles often, not because her life was easy, but because her spirit was unbroken. She grew herbs in her garden, hummed as she cooked, told stories to children, and spent long hours in nature. Her neighbors said she glowed, not from any secret elixir, but from the joy that lived inside her. Joy, after all, is the light that illuminates beauty. Without joy, even the most perfect features seem dull. But with joy, even a simple face becomes luminous. Joy is not always loud. Sometimes it is soft, quiet, and steady. It does not mean constant happiness. It means gratitude. It means the ability to find beauty in a cup of tea, in the rustle of leaves, in the voice of a loved one. A joyful woman is one who has chosen to see the sacred in the ordinary. This choice becomes part of her beauty as these inner qualities deepen. They begin to reflect outward. They change the way you speak, the way you move, the way you respond. They build a new kind of attractiveness, one rooted not in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. There is no rule book for beauty as you age. There is only awareness. Awareness of how you live, how you love, how you carry your years. When this awareness is cultivated, the need for approval fades. And in that space where seeking ends, true radiance begins. What society once taught about age and appearance is not your destiny. It is just a perspective. You can change your perspective. And in doing so, you can change how you experience yourself. When the eyes are trained to see through kindness, what once looked like a flaw becomes a feature. What once felt like a loss becomes a gift. You realize you were never supposed to remain the same. You were meant to grow into yourself, to shed the masks, to stop performing. And in that quiet, powerful arrival into your own being, you become something very rare. You become a woman whose beauty no longer depends on anything outside of herself. You become light in form, not perfect, not youthful, but whole. So, next time you look in the mirror and wonder whether you've still got it, remember this: you never lost it. Beauty didn't fade, it transformed into something deeper, richer, and infinitely more powerful. Because you are not just a good-looking older woman, you are radiant, and you always have been.